Okay. Thank you, Guillaume. And so it's nice to speak to you all. I've spoken to several groups who've gone through Deeptech Founders before, and I've also spoken to many of them about investment, and I'm in the middle of speaking to one of them right now about investment. So I have seen the path, I've seen the success of their process. So well done for getting on the program. So I'm going to talk to you about a subject that comes up in almost every case of a venture founded by a scientific founder, and that is, do you need a CEO? Specifically, do you need a different person to come in as CEO? But just going back to what Guillaume described, because it's a key context. The context in which you will be considering, do you need a CEO, is that you have successfully passed the kind of tests that Deeptech Founders is putting you through. You have figured out what is your business model, and you're going to take the thing forward. And you know, I love the questions. I mean, Artem and Brigitte, you're both struggling with the uncertainty. There's so many variables, and you know, Artem, as Guillaume said, if you could create a piece of software for this, you'd be a very wealthy person. But really, it does come down to, you know, you can simplify it quite a lot by starting with the question of who needs your science. And I will come on to that in my presentation. I will refer back to this. But you know, you hopefully all have developed some intellectual property from your scientific work, and hopefully there are some people who need that intellectual property and understand the significance of it. So if you believe that your intellectual property solves a significant problem, then it all begins by finding the people who understand the significance of that intellectual property. And they may not be your final market, Brigitte. You know, as you said, it may change from time to time, but you must start with the people who understand the significance of what you've done. And sometimes they are not in your they're not necessarily in your perfect final market, but you kind of have to start there. And sometimes they're in the companies who have hired people with the same background as you, who understand that even though you're only at TRL 3 or TRL 4, it is quite a significant development. And they can see how, with investment and with cooperation from companies, you could go further. And if you can't find those people, you are screwed, to put it simply. You know, ordinary investors mostly don't understand your what you've done. You know, if you're not going out there with some simple piece of software or something that's easy to understand, most investors will just say, look, you know, it sounds great, you know, well done, you know, but I don't understand it. I only invest in software, you know, bye. But if you can go to them and say, this is a very significant problem. You know, it's a very significant problem for the cement industry. And these 3 huge cement companies are really interested in what we've done. And the reason they're interested is because you have been able to find the people with a similar background to you in those companies, explain to them what you have achieved. And they're saying, this is amazing. You know, we want to get involved, even though they don't have a product yet. And one of you asked the question about, surely I need a lot of money. You do not need a lot of money. If you are able to articulate the significance of what you have discovered or what you have developed, then there are people who will say, okay, we have been trying to do that for years, and you're not finished doing it yet, but still you're much further along than we are, so we will cooperate with you. And then when you can find those people, then it validates to you that there is an opportunity, but it also helps convince early investors who don't understand what you've got that yes, it is great, because these people over here who do understand what you've got are willing to commit money in some way. So that's so to introduce myself, I run a fund called Deeptech Seed Fund, and we are specifically oriented towards funding ventures that are based on some intellectual property, but not in life sciences. We don't do life sciences, and we have a very clear methodology on what it is you need to do to develop a deep tech venture. And there are really 2 main parts to it. One is, from the beginning, you must find the people who need your science and who can validate that, yes, there is an opportunity for the science. And in finding those people, you need to get them committed in some way. So you need not just letters of intent or kind of weak comments that, yes, that's nice. You need them to actually, you know, give you some money in some way for a pilot or something. And the second thing we strongly believe is that if you are developing a science venture and it is a venture that is ultimately going to need a lot of money, then you need to begin speaking to the large, later stage international venture capital firms as early as possible. Because if you just get your local money from some angels and from some local VCs, and then suddenly you're going out looking for 50 million or 100 million, and you're talking to those guys for the first time, you will either not get the money at all, or it will take you an awfully long time. So if your science breakthrough is good enough, it is possible to interact with the later stage investors, and that's what we do. So before we invest, we introduce the ventures to the later stage specialist guys in their field, and also we help them we help ventures with their interaction with the early adopter customers. So that's what we do, and I'll come back to that at the very end. So imagine you've done all that, and it's great. It's looking really good. You've convinced 2 or 3, significant global companies that your science really is world leading and significant, and they're willing to make some commitment to you. And you're going out to raise €500,000 or €1 million or whatever it is. And then the investor taps you on the shoulder and says, Bridget, you're very nice. I really like you, but you're not a CEO. You've never been a CEO. You've never worked before. You've never left college before. You can't possibly do this. So if you want our money, you need a new CEO. So that is a really common situation. A lot of conventional thinking is like that, but they are wrong. And I will sort of tell you my thinking on this and how to sort of form your own opinion on this. And so I'm going to share some slides. What did Guillaume say? He's old school or something like that. So this is my slides are very old school. So give me a moment and I will show you the leading edge technology I've used to present this presentation. So just a moment now. Okay. So I've got a small number of slides and I'm going to take you through them. And then I would love some questions from you and we can have a good interactive discussion, I hope. And this is being recorded and I may share this presentation somewhere else. So if you want to say anything really controversial or crazy, then do it with me offline. I'll put up my contact details in a little while. So to begin, so the scenario, the scenario where this question arises is, you are, as Guillaume said, most of you are scientists. So you've done some big science thing. You're excited about it. You think there is an opportunity to create a venture. And then hopefully, all going well with the passage of time, you will create some large science-based venture, and it's all going to be wonderful, some great big company. And whether or not you need a smokestack is another question. But right now you're at this stage of, you're at the junction of science and industry. And this is when this question of, do you need to hire? Do you need to bring in a new person as CEO? That's when that question comes up. So let's consider what might come into your head when you consider this question. Many of you will go straight to the question of, well, look, am I able to do this? I have been a scientist all my life and I've done really well at school. I did really well at university. I was tapped on the shoulder by my professor who got me to do a PhD. I've always been really good at stuff. I don't want to do something I don't know how to do. I don't want to fail. Then you may similarly say, well, actually, I don't really want to do it anyway. I'd rather just stay in the lab and further develop this thing. I don't want to be the CEO. And I mean, I don't even know what needs to be done. I don't know what the job involves. And so if you've kind of convinced yourself on those first three, then you come to the question of, well, who could I get to be chief executive? If I'm going to hire a new person, who could I get? So I'm going to take you through these questions and sort of some thoughts or some answers on each of these questions, not in this order, but in the order I've numbered them at. I've numbered in the order corresponding with the way that I have numbered them here. So first of all, consider what needs to be done. And imagine a situation where you have persuaded some group of people that, yes, there is a need for your technology and they're willing to cooperate with you. But even before that, you've got to find these early adopters who understand the need for what you've done. And then hopefully when you've found those people, you need to actually develop it further. During your seed stage, there's probably going to be a bunch of technical development where you're taking it from TRL 3 to 5 or 6 to 8 or whatever it is. So there's a technical job. There's also there's also a need to demonstrate to the early adopters that you're actually capable of doing that. An awful lot of an awful lot of science-based founders never succeed in productizing their science. A huge amount of stuff, that is done in a physics lab never sort of works in an engineering lab. So, you've got to prove that. And then you've also, by doing that, you've got to turn your early adopters from people who've given you a small amount of money to do some sort of a pilot project with them into people who are actually going to be work with you at the next stage. They're actually going to buy the product, or else they're going to sort of fund the next stage of your development. And all of these tasks are primarily technical. They're not generic business tasks. These are the things that need to be done now, and they are primarily technical. So consider, are you able to do these things? Hold on. Do I need to hide? Yeah. Like the capabilities that are needed here variously are ability to talk to potential customers. Now, the discussions are primarily technical. It's about, describing in quite a lot of detail the background to what it is you've achieved. There is a question, can you manage a team? Hopefully you've had research collaborators in what you've been doing so far, and hopefully some of your collaborators are available to work with you in the venture, or you might have some involvement with the university still, but hopefully you have good relations with some people who can work with you on this. And during this sort of first phase of the company, your ability to actually manage that development, manage that team is going to be closely watched. But the key question in regard to, are you able to do this, is, could anybody else possibly do that? And the answer to that is overwhelmingly no. So you may be in doubt as to whether you can do these items, but the question as to whether anybody else can do it is absolutely no. And particularly this question of, evangelizing the intellectual property. In all of the, and sorry, I've done this several times. Okay, I've brought tech from lab into commerce with a good level of success a number of times, and I've always, had the key technical people out front all the time. And the reason is because one of the key characteristics of the successful companies is not just that they own a piece of intellectual property and they own a certain patent that was filed based on that intellectual property, but that there is a world-leading expert within the company who is driving the the engineering and the science in that company. And you are that person, and you are the kind of the visionary founder, and people don't expect you to be, perfect in various other ways. And they'd be almost surprised if you were a bit too slick, too well presented. They'd say, this person isn't much of a scientist. So, so the answer to my top question basically is yes, you are capable, because, even though you may be deficient in some respects, you are sufficient or more than sufficient in the key respect. So supposing you said, no, Pearse, yeah, great presentation, thank you very much, but it's probably different in Ireland, so you don't really understand. So I'm actually, we do need to get a CEO, because that's what we do in my country. So then ask yourself the question, okay, fine, off you go. Off you go and try and get somebody, and look at who you end up with. So you've got to consider the job application. It's like one of those, if you've probably seen there's an old job advertisement that I think Scott, or one of these guys who was exploring the Antarctic in the beginning of the 20th century, put out, which is like, no pay, awful conditions, applied to this number. And apparently an incredibly large number of people applied. But you've got to ask, what kind of people do apply for sort of crazy jobs like that? There's no salary. You have the failure rate for science-based startup is very high, and it's usually because there's a complete lack of proven product market fit, and so you have to really ask yourself, do you want the people who want the job? And that is a very big consideration. And I can tell you, I've seen a lot of ventures who have taken on somebody because they thought they needed to take on somebody. They got who was available. And if they're anyway successful, then that person is the wrong person for the job. And very often they fail because of the person they put into that job. So it just does not work. It just does not work out well. Now, as I'll say in a moment, it doesn't mean it's never going to be right for you to get somebody in. But right now, at the stage you're at, it's definitely, in my opinion, not right to get somebody in. So then go back to, one of my other questions, do you want to be the CEO? And first of all, if your inclination was already yes, if coming into this discussion, you already thought, well, I'd rather be the CEO, then absolutely, go for it. Take on the challenge. There's all kinds of risks in bringing a new person in, but get, hire good commercial help. Find an advisor, find a non-executive director, find an investor who can give you the kind of the right advice, and be involved in some sort of part-time basis or advisory capacity. And as long as you kind of get yourself access to that skill that you don't have, or get your company access to that skill that you don't have, then you're absolutely fine. And if you don't do that, then I can tell you, and I'll more detail on this in a moment, you can kind of expect a mediocre outcome for your company. All the best companies are led by the founder CEO. So, and whether it's Mark Zuckerberg or the couple who created Moderna, or Sergey Brin and the other guys in Google, the really big companies still have the key founders in the key roles at the stage where they are very successful. Now, if you're challenged about this, and then people say, well, Artem, great guy, great science, but I don't see you as the CEO. You just say, look, we will revisit this question after the seed stage. I am the person who needs to steer the project through this next stage of technical development. We will manage the relationship with the early adopter customers tightly. I've got this person who's going to be my executive chairman, and they're going to help me a little bit. I've got this other business advisor. And as long as you show that you are open to the idea of potentially being replaced in the future, a lot of investors will take confidence in that. They will see that you're not delusional, and that you have a sort of self-awareness that perhaps you're the right person for now, but might not be the right person for the next stage. But also, at that next stage, you will then have a better idea as to what kind of person you do need. And if you do need a new person, you'll be in a much better position in terms of access to money to pay them. And also the company will look a lot more promising. So you'll get a much better quality of person. But you can revisit this at each stage of funding. And as long as you express yourself willing to do that, the investors will say, that's great, that's fine. They will be more comfortable with that idea. If you suggest that, no, I am the person forever, it's my company, then you'll kind of scare the investors a little bit. So, and one of the reasons why you end up with these sort of mediocre outcomes from hired in CEOs is that very often people who are coming in, it's not their life's work. They see it as a sort of a 2 to 5 year project. They'll help you get on a little bit further, flip the company. I think whoever that was put the comment in the chat made that point, that some ventures, I think it was in life sciences, they very often get flipped at one of the later regulatory stages. They're acquired quite early. And a hired-in CEO is often kind of oriented towards that. Bring it to a certain stage and then sell the company. And also, if you're in doubt about whether you want the job or not, after the seed stage, you'll have a much better idea as to whether you do want the job, and also whether you can do the job. So finally, so do it yourself, unless there's a really strong reason for somebody else to do it, or unless there is some person that whom you know and trust who wants to do the job, maybe an investor or somebody who's done a venture in this space before, whom you trust. It is rare. That is rarely the case. Okay, so if you do have a person like that, then yes, okay, strongly consider it. But most of you won't. So don't think that the faraway hills are greener and that there are these amazing people out there who can do all this cool stuff. It is pretty much you, and it has to be you. Be willing to reconsider the question afterwards. Make sure that you understand your limitations, and then you get the advice where you need the advice. So that is the sum total of my opinion on this subject. I'm going to put into the chat now a couple of extra things for you to just look up if you want, and then I would love your questions. Just to put in the chat. Chat. Okay, so what I put in the chat is there's a couple of presentations I've given before about how you get early adopters, and I've also got a thing in here about a sort of a template as to how you ask for money from an early adopter, and the process of going out to those early adopters, will hugely answer the kind of questions that Brigitte and Artem were asking early on. It'll kind of like you could spend all day filling out a business model canvas, like in theory, but after you've spoken to a bunch of people who might need your technology, you'll have a whole bunch of like, aha, it'll all become a lot clearer to you, and you will see, hopefully some routes to market or potential routes to market. You may also see, as Huyen alluded to, you may see much bigger opportunities that you hadn't considered with your technology. So if any of you are interested, if any of you are not in life sciences and you are interested to potentially work with us on helping you do some of that and reach out to later stage investors, then we are interested to work with you on doing that. And in return, we ask for an option to put in a small amount of money for some small percentage of your company. But it would not with that. We don't ask for that commitment at the very beginning. So if you're interested to talk to me and you think you're going to go down that way of finding early adopter customers, then by all means reach out. So just copy and paste that what I put on the chat just now. And otherwise, I would love to get your questions. Hard questions, please.
Hi, there's one hard question in the chat, Pearse, which is from Julien, and it is how to get good commercial advice.
Yeah. So, okay. Good question. And I would say that, there's an old technique where if you want to, get help from somebody, or if you want to recruit somebody or get an investor, you go and ask for their advice. I'd really value your advice, And I would say that very often the best place to start is people who've done exits in your space. So if you look at companies who have, so there's a few different ways. Okay, I think the best way, if you can do it, is to go and find the people who have founded companies in your space. They might still be the chief executive. There might be a sort of a non-chief executive technical role in those companies, or ideally people who've done exits from your space. So they're already out of their previous company. And they are often quite interested to do something again in the space because they know that they have a fantastic set of contacts and they have a whole bunch of lessons. So they are the best people if you can find them, and you can do that globally. Trawl LinkedIn and various places, and and you can reach out to the people directly, and people are very happy to help. Early. There's a lot of goodwill towards early stage ventures. And if somebody has a big personal investment in a space, they know a lot about it, and then somebody comes along looking for help, they very often will respond positively. And even if they can't help you, directly, very often they will have a very good idea as to who you should speak to, what kind of advisors or consultants or potential angel investors would be available to. So that's one source. Secondly, most university tech transfer departments have a kind of a panel of commercial advisors that they know are good or bad. They're not very often. A lot of them are very generic. They help in all kinds of different sectors. They usually have a very good understanding of business, and they understand the early stage. They understand the process of taking things out of science. And so your university commercialization guys will definitely have a panel of people like that. And you can speak to them informally without charge. They will say, well, yes, I could probably help you, and yeah, if you can get a grant to pay me or something like that. But initially, the initial conversations will definitely be free. And the other source, which is also quite good, and it kind of kills two birds with one stone if you can do this, is find the investors who have invested in the space. So go and look at the companies that have started in your space and look at who invested in them. And there are a bunch of specialist funds out there, and they typically act globally. So they are, sometimes small, sometimes very big. Funds focused on chemistry, focused on materials, focused on building materials, whatever it is, and those people have spent time developing expertise in a particular niche. so and they try to invest only in that niche. So if somebody comes to them, no matter where they've come from, and they're relevant, then they will talk to them, because they say, okay, this is relevant to me. I've invested a lot of time understanding this space. There is a potential investment, maybe in a year's time, or maybe in 2 years' time, depending on their stage of investment, that's coming along. So I would be nice to these guys, and then they will ask me to invest in them later on. And the VCs typically have a very good knowledge of, who are the relevant kind of commercial advisors or people who might be who might be relevant, and you will get advice directly from the VCs. You will get advice directly from the VCs as well. So three things. So find founders of companies in your space who are a little bit further along. Obviously, ideally not competing with you now. Talk to your university commercialization department, and find the venture capital firms that have invested in your space, and go looking for the announcement. So some of the VC firms are big. Go looking for the announcement of the deal, and normally it will say which person in that VC firm is the person working with that specific company, and that's the person you need to find. So go looking, or that person will probably be on the board of that company. So do a little bit of research. And then you say, hey, look, I see that you invested in, this particular company. I'm creating a company, very similar science background, and so on. Does that answer your question, Julien?
Yeah, thank you very much.
So Isabel has another question there, which I will answer. The question is, having a background only as a researcher, are you credible for investors at all? And so there are different types of investors, okay, and there are different types of investors, and if the investors don't deal with science-based ventures, then just don't talk to them at all. I mean, if they're looking for fully formed businesses, then you're dealing with the wrong investors. But there are a bunch of investors who are focused on deep tech and science, and they're not expecting people to be business people. Like you got to understand, and this particularly applies to sort of green related investments. The really great ventures are not the really great ventures are not a bunch of commercial people who have they're experienced commercial people. We're going to create a company now, and we're going to save gigatons of carbon every year because we've got this amazing new hydrogen, green hydrogen making technology. Those kind of really big impact ventures only come from research, and the people who are fronting those need to be from that research. So there is a whole bunch of investors who are expecting the scientists to come along, and if the people coming along weren't scientists, they wouldn't really believe in them. So I would completely, Isabel, what you think is a weakness is actually a strength here. So I mean, that's my strong view on the subject. And if the people you're dealing with are not willing to deal with scientists, then you're absolutely talking to the wrong investors. There are enough investors who deal with scientists. And again, go back to what I said. Talk to people who've done exits before, or who've done ventures before in your space, and and look for the investors who've invested in the space that you're in, and they will talk to you. They'll be very happy to talk, because they say, great, I spent, before I invested in that company, I spent months figuring out the whole market, how the whole thing worked, and I only made one investment out of it, which was kind of a waste of effort in a way. So and oh look, this is great. Here's another one coming up from the same space. So there's quite a good synergy between specialist investors and science-based ventures that come from that same specialization. You've just got to do a bit of work. It's not the investor down the road. It's not the ones who are near you. You've got to go looking for them. And the market for intellectual property-based ventures is global. It's not which is the best one in France, which is the relevant investor in France, which is the best early adopter in France. It's who are the companies in the world who are going to be most affected by this intellectual property? Because nobody is buying the third best cancer treatment or the fourth best cancer treatment, or turning on a TV that has the fifth or sixth best display technology. It's the top two or three solutions that win. So you've got to go global in looking for your investors, in looking for your early adopters as well. So I hope that answers your question, Isabel. And So Julien has a question. Let me see. From VC point of view, what is considered a great team for Deeptech startups? So that's a great question, Julien. So, it's really interesting. And I'll just tell you a story. So I'm doing a lot of work in the UK with there's a really big national sort of deep tech incubator process that's called iCure, and they had a problem, and they noticed that. So I've spent a lot of time looking to invest in things that have come through that incubator, and I found certain problems. There were certain problems were coming up over and over again, and then the company that the organization that funds it, which is a bit like the UK equivalent of BPE, they also noticed that there was some reasons why ventures failed. And so they've started to do an analysis of why did they fail, and then they go looking back at the characteristics of the venture, and the common. I would say, Julien, that the way I would express the issues around the team goes something like this. First of all, the team needs to have ownership, control, and drive. So ownership, you must have got you're going to create a venture. So you've been working in university. You've been dealing with some full-time academics who've done some of the research, and now you are Julien is creating the company, and maybe you're going to hire one or two people. So you're going to be full-time in the company. So this is your baby, and so the most important thing from a team point of view, looking at it as investors, does the team have control and ownership of the venture? So is the venture mostly owned by the team that is going to work full-time in the venture? Now, you may have, professor or somebody who's still cooperating with you, but you mustn't have a situation where the people who are full-time academics, who are being paid by the university, who have zero risk, you mustn't have those people owning most of the venture, or even a very large amount of the venture. Now, if those people are willing to take a year off and work in the venture, or are able to commit formally to maybe 2 days a week in the venture, then you can give them a good chunk. But it must be a case that the team that is executing on it, that is going to be spending the VC's money, actually has an incentive to do well. So they've got to own it. And the other related thing is the university mustn't have some crazy percentage. Like sort of 20% or less is kind of okay. 30 is pretty uncomfortable. But anything above that, and it's like, forget about it, guys. And then within the team, Julien, and this could be the same person. You must have at least technical credibility. So there must be a person within the university who has great technical credibility, who can go into any of these early adopter customers. And as I say, the early adopter customers really are the ones where in that company there is a similar level of expertise. They understand the significance of your science. And so there must be a person within your team, full-time in the team, who's able, and it could be you, who's going in and able to sit down and impress them with their knowledge of the subject and with their plans to bring the thing forward. And secondly, either that person or somebody within the team basically needs to have their act together. And they look like they can actually manage things. They can, control the cash, or they can just actually manage a project. So three things. The team must own most of the venture, like at the seed stage, the vast majority of the venture, because you're going to get diluted by venture capital, and you've got to sort of, so you have to begin with owning sort of 70 or 80% of the venture. So team must own most of the venture. The team must include, one of the full-time team must be very credible technically in the space. And thirdly, one of the team, if not that same person, must be organized. Actually, and just let me give you a tip here. And I don't do life sciences, and I probably the majority of you are in life sciences. Let me tell you a trick that I and all VCs use, and it is a test for that organizational skill. So I speak to you today, and Julien, it's great to talk to you. I love your potential opportunity, really great. And you tell me that you're going to do the following things over the next month or 6 weeks. and then we go on a call in 6 weeks' time, and you haven't done those things, or you forgot about the call, or there's some silly, mess up in setting up the call, and then when you're on the call, you forget what you said at the last call, and little things like that. And I'm thinking, running a company is quite complicated. It's quite challenging. A lot of stuff really, falls apart. And if you're going to have a whole, at least 3 or 4 or 5 people doing the thing, and you can't even organize something simple like that, and you overpromised, you thought you were going to have these things done in 6 weeks, and you're not even close. You actually forgotten what you promised. Like the longitudinal view, like watching how people perform over a short period of time, is very, very telling. It's surprisingly telling. So, Julien, it's not just a point in time. What do we think of the team now? That's really great, Julien. Let's speak in a month's time. And it's like watching what happens in the intervening time. That's huge. And just impressing by saying, yeah, actually, we were hoping that, when we spoke to last time, we were hoping that this, here's a little trick, right? So you speak to somebody on a particular date, you know that you've almost achieved something. You're pretty sure you're going to achieve it like tomorrow. Maybe you've already achieved it. And you say to them, we're hoping in the next month we will actually achieve that thing. I'll get that commitment from the customer, whatever it is. And then you speak to them in a month's time. Oh yeah, we actually, 2 days after the call, we actually did it. Amazing. We're actually way ahead. Like it's so under promise, over deliver. Promise stuff you are certain is going to happen. And then at the next call, it's actually happened. And that puts you in the big league immediately. You have no idea like what a small minority of people actually succeed in doing that. And that's really important because that plays into everything. You're talking to customers. A classic thing that everybody gets wrong, or that, people are over optimistic, and they say, yes, we have managed to prove that it works at gram scale. And in the next, before we even commit to this project, in the next month, we're hoping we will get it at the sort of a 20 gram scale. And then you don't succeed in doing that. And the customer you're speaking to thinks, my God, they're asking me to commit 50 grand to a pilot project, and like they're way off. They're not even close to what they said they were going to do. So that's it, Julian. I hope that answers your question. And now the next question is from Redwan. Forming characteristics. You look for a start. Forming characteristics. 4. Why 4, Redwan? Why 4? Tough. Okay, let me think.
If you want to give 3 or 5, just feel free.
Don't worry. No, you asked for 4.
Okay.
Let it be said. 4. How many? That's 5 fingers. 4 fingers. Okay, here we go. That's easy, and I'm in the middle of a presentation, kind of a little bit about something like that. So number one for me by a long way is that there is market validation, that there is evidence that somebody is willing to commit funds to it, that there are early adopters who are willing to demonstrate that they really need the scientific breakthrough. So I think I'm still sharing, so I'll just stop sharing. Have I stopped sharing? Okay.
Yes, you are.
So number one by far is that there is evidence of demand in the market, really tangible demand. The second thing then is the kind of stuff that I mentioned in my answer to Julien, that there is a credible team. Now, it can be a kind of a one-man band or a one-woman band. You can build a team around one credible person. If there is a person with great drive, they're technically credible, and you could see how people would like working for them and joining them. So at least one person who looks like people could work for them. Ideally more than one, but at least one really credible person. And if the person was so the second point is team, essentially. And if the person was a kind of really geeky founder, or really geeky technical person, and it didn't look like they could do all the things themselves, then there's got to be more than one. You've got to have some sort of a complementary team. So team would be number 2. Then it comes down to kind of structural stuff after that. And I'm looking up at my whiteboard here, where I've just done this, preparing this other presentation. Then it comes down to probably two other things. One is the structure of the kind of legal stuff. And what I mean is, like, there are certain characteristics of deep tech startups that are completely go, no go. Like, for example, if the university has some crazy high percentage in the company, or if the university won't give exclusive IP license, or has an IP license with some crazy fees, or will not agree to terms under which the license can be bought out. So university-related problems where there is a share structure that is wrong, like the university has some crazy terms in there, or the IP agreement isn't good. So that's kind of it's kind of a negative, really. I'm looking for the absence of that. So one of my characteristics is that, there's clean terms from the university, fair terms, and then finally it comes down to price. Are there fair terms for the investor? And that is quite tricky in France. And the reason it's tricky in France is because there's an absolute ton of what I would call dumb money available at the startup stage. Like, there's an enormous amount of state money available, and that crowds out the private investor a lot of the time. It means that the evaluation at the seed stage can be very unattractive to a seed stage investor. And that's why we are making the offer we make now, which is, get us involved really early, way before you're investor ready. We think we can add significant value. We can connect you with the sort of key later stage investors, all that stuff. But we want equity at a sort of an attractive price now. So to recap, evidence of demand, a credible team or credible individual, reasonable terms in relation to IP and the universities, the founding setup, or no kind of crazy terms, and finally, fair terms to the investor, attractive terms for the investor. There you go. That's 4. And actually, it pretty much is. It pretty much is those 4. So I don't know how you knew it was 4, Redwan, but well done for that. And thanks for dragging that out of me. So Artem asks, what are investors expecting to see? Are there any red flags? That's a good question. So let me answer that for myself, Artem, because a lot of different people have different approaches. Okay, different people have different approaches, and to use an analogy that I've used in some presentations, the best thing you can do, it's a kind of roundabout answer to your question, but the best thing you can do is to demonstrate that there is a demand for your IP. And the analogy I use is, imagine you run a chip shop, or a restaurant. Imagine a typical British chip shop, and there's a queue outside the door every night. Every night there's a big long queue outside the door, and it's so long they can't service the demand. And the chip shop owner is going to the bank manager saying, "I need a loan because I want to open a second chip shop, 2 or 3 blocks away. And look at here's the pictures. Here are the pictures from outside my chip shop for the last 7 nights. So there is demand, okay, and I just need the money to service that demand. And I'm going to run that other chip shop myself. My son and daughter are going to run the existing chip shop. So there you've got demand, a straightforward financial proposition, evidence of capability, with all the things. It's really easy. So if you can find evidence of demand, and ideally go back to my sort of idea of the CEO situation, where you're saying, okay, look, we have 2 or 3 significant companies who are evidencing demand for my product, for my intellectual property, and they're going to invest some money. They're going to part fund the pilot. The pilot is going to take the technology from TRL 3 to TRL 5. And in total, I'm going to have $500,000 from seed investors, or $1 million, whatever it is. So I'm going to have a total amount of money of $500,000. And with that $500,000, I'm going to do the following things. We're going to technically progress the intellectual property from TRL 3 to TRL 5, or in life sciences, we're going to take it through some of the regulatory stages, whatever it is, or the next regulatory stage, or on the regulatory pathway. So there is a defined technical objective that looks like it can be done well within budget. So there is a group of a small number of early adopters who are evidencing demand. And then during that period, I'm also going to spend time recruiting other potential customers. So I'm going to get $500,000 or $1 million to achieve some things that are quite achievable. And, I'm going to run the show. So what the investor needs to see, Artem, is a person articulate that kind of a simple investor proposition. I want a reasonable amount of money to do something to service a demand, the evidence for which I have demonstrated, and what it is we need to do. I can show you. Here's the costs. Here's the cost of the technical stuff. It's going to cost, like, in total about 150 to 200 grand. I'm raising $500,000. Because I've got some commercial stuff to do, and also I want a margin for error. So what they want is a person coming along to them with a very credible plan like that, and then they say, "That's great. I understand it's $500,000, or I'm providing 200K of the 500, whatever it is, and I can see how it's going to be very sensibly spent." So they want a person who can tell that story, and what they look like, and gender and scientific background or whatever, it doesn't matter. I hope that answers your question. Was there any other questions higher up that I didn't answer?
Or if there are other questions, don't hesitate to ask them out loud.
Sorry, ask the question again.
I was saying, if people have other questions, don't hesitate to ask them also out loud.
Yeah, okay, no, that's true. But going back up, Isabel asked a question earlier on. Who is the customer? Who is the customer? So, and that's a good question, okay, because many of you are in life science. So in the case of a drug, who is the customer? The patients, the clinicians, the pharma to whom we send the product. Okay, so that's a good question. And let me address that question, because a lot of my language describes a kind of an industrial business to business kind of situation. But the same thing does apply in life sciences, and it applies like this. So give me a moment. So you have your life sciences intellectual property at a certain stage, and ultimately, there's a regulatory pathway between the stage you're at and the point where you have a finished product, a treatment or whatever it's going to be, and so you believe it has great potential, and you think that you're going to need €1 million to take it to the next stage. And so you could go out to a group of life sciences VCs and say, "Hey, look, I have worked out the cost. It's about €750,000 that I need. I'm raising 1 million, and I have I've been working in this area for ages. I've got Professor so and so from this clinic who's going to work with me on it part-time, and I've got this amazing team, and yes, and you can see here's all the statistics about how big a problem it is." Okay, so that's all very well. Okay, you can make a pitch like that, and you might be looking, you might get money. But what is much more compelling is if you can have, now you obviously can't wheel out 20 sick people and say, yes, these sick people, if they survive long enough, they say they all want my treatment. That's obviously not possible. But what you can do is you can find, stakeholder groups, associations that are, patient associations that are focused on that problem, or groups of clinicians who are focused on that problem, and you can look at the people who need to cooperate with you on the regulatory pathway, and seek commitments from them. Like most of those organizations that are focused on a particular problem have funds. They have funds to give to research. And if you're able to say that, the French Cancer Society, whatever it is, giving me a 50,000 grant towards this as well, then that's very strong evidence. Or, you are going to need to recruit a population of 10,000 patients for for that second stage. And I have commitments here from 4 large clinics that say they're going to work with me on doing that. So you can find, I suppose, proxies for the customer, but people who can demonstrate that they want this thing to come into being. You can also potentially knock on the doors of the big pharma companies that might be the ones who will acquire your company or technology later on, and many of them have processes and funds for interacting with early stage ventures. So it is possible to find people now who can with financial commitment or with willingness to invest in kind through cooperation in trials or whatever, who can make a commitment to you, and that commitment being your tangible evidence of demand for the for what might result from the breakthrough that you've made. I hope that answers Isabel's questions. So hold on, another question here. Yeah, so Brigitte asked another question. What financial form can the support from early adopters take? So there's a whole bunch of different things, and actually, if you follow that link I put out ages ago, I actually describe several of those. So generally not shares. Okay, most of the kind of organizations you're dealing with don't invest. Very few companies are in a position to invest in early stage ventures. So the classic situation is that, you know, you're going to some company and you're saying to them that, look, you know, I believe that I've developed the means to solve this highly significant problem, and you know, I can go and create a startup and get some investor money and develop this amazing solution and make it available to you and all your competitors, and you know, I could do that. But if you want this technology, if you want to make sure that this intellectual property is developed in a way that suits your particular situation, and if you want to make sure you get early access to it, then we're, by the way, we're in the process of going out and raising $1 million. We're mostly going to develop it with other people's money, but we want a kind of a token contribution from you, 20, 30, 40,000 euros, not a kind of a small amount of money that somebody can put on their credit card, but an amount of money which demonstrates a kind of corporate commitment to the thing. So you're mostly sorry. Let me go back a step. First of all, it's worth considering what do you need to do next. So Brigitte, you know, you have your intellectual property at a certain stage. What are you going to need to do next? So you can go out with an idea that says, okay, well, I've demonstrated my material at gram scale. I think that to be credible, I will need to demonstrate it at sort of the scale of tens of grams, and I need all this equipment to do this. So you'll have your own idea as to what it is you should do next. You go and talk to the potential early adopter, and you say to them, look, so I've got it at this stage. I'm pretty excited about it. We're now going to go to this sort of, you know, tens of gram scale. And we're raising about $500,000 from that, and in parallel with raising investor money, we're looking for evidence of commitment from people. And you don't have to be very specific, okay? Cash is easiest because it's, you know, investors can totally agree. But the early adopter could say, well, look, you know, if you're going to do that, you're going to need to hire like a ton of really expensive equipment to do that. We will make our lab available to you for that period. So it could be an in-kind thing, as long as it kind of looks like it actually costs them money or there's an effort on their part. So it could be an in-kind thing. It might that might reduce your financial need from $500,000 to, you know, 300 grand or something. So that's pretty significant. Cash is easiest. Some of them do have early stage funds and they would consider joining your investment round, but you need to be really careful taking money from companies at the seed stage. It's possible, you know, it's possible. You just need to be careful because they'll very often put in all kinds of creepy terms, giving them the right to buy you and stuff like that. There's other things you can do. You can get pre-orders for product, so they can pay you an amount of money, and in return they would get a certain number of products. There's a variety of ways. Look at my proposal document. It suggests, and it doesn't matter. You know, I wouldn't. You don't need to be too specific in the initial conversation. You can just sort of, and I have that in that proposal. You can see that it just says, at the beginning you're just trying to. At the beginning, you're just trying to see, do you connect? Are they interested in the in what you've got? And after that, you can sort of shape the discussion. But what you must understand is that if I'm going back to my display technology example, you know, if I'm sitting in Samsung or somewhere and I'm really trying to get a better sort of, you know, OLED technology or something. For my display screens, I can see all kinds of cool stuff happening in universities around the world, and you would be surprised. A lot of the major companies a lot of the major companies are studying what's coming out of the universities. They're watching papers published. They're watching patents being filed. And you think you have to go and knock on their door. But if you're in the right space, very often they will have heard of you already. But what they are looking for is, like, they know that a lot of the papers published are, if you pardon my French, they're just bullshit. People, talking stuff up, and the peers reviewing them are saying, yeah, that's great. What they all want is the teams that are willing to take stuff from TRL 3 up to TRL 6 or 7. They want people to kind of push out and say, okay, yeah, it's not just a breakthrough that I managed to get a paper published for. I think I can actually commercialize this, because stuff at sort of TRL 2 and 3 is no good to Samsung and to the big companies. They've got all sorts of stuff at really early stages in their own labs. What they want is to place little bets on companies and individuals that are saying, okay, I think I can take this all the way. I think I can actually, get this working on a 1 meter by 1 meter screen, or whatever it is, and they say, that's great. Giving you 50 grand for a trial is really, really cheap for us. Because you're mostly spending other people's money. You've already spent 2 million of French government money to get to this point. It's really cheap. But what is scarce for them is time and skills. So you're going to do it on your own time, mostly with somebody else's money, and a little bit of money from them. So it's quite easy. It's surprisingly easy, and all they're waiting for is to be asked in the correct way. They say, oh, great. So you come along to them with a sensible proposition. And they might say, well, no, we can't give you cash, but look, here's what we can do. Most of them understand how to deal with science-based ventures as well. And if they can't give you cash, they may be willing to sort of absolutely rave about you to the to other investors or something like that. There's a variety of ways they can help you.
So then, does it lead to share intellectual property?
Excellent question, Brigitte. So ideally, no. So you should run a mile from the shared intellectual property. Okay. If you're really weak, if you're really stuck, you would end up doing that. And that's another, I am horrified also when somebody tells me, oh yes, and I can get 1 million if I go to this particular EU fund and I need 4 different universities cooperating and so on. There's a huge opportunity cost for that kind of stuff. So no, Brigitte, it does not have to. If you're really stuck and you can't get money anywhere else and you've only got one potential industrial customer, then maybe it does, and maybe you end up just working for them. But no is this the standard. Only if you're really desperate. If you're and what you can reasonably, they will all ask for it, okay? But what you can reasonably say to them is, no, we are setting this up as a startup. If you want to get a share of the intellectual property, then you can invest in our company and essentially part own it, okay? But our other investors will not tolerate any encroachment on our intellectual property. That's your excuse. I'd love to give you, but actually, no, we're doing this as as an arm's length product supplier. And they'll say, oh yeah, well, we had to try. It's fine. They're used to that answer.
So what's the price then? If you ask for 50,
sorry, Artem, start again. It's quite difficult to hear you. I think you if you change your mic, it might help.
Do you hear now? It's okay.
Go on. It's okay. Go on. I'll try.
I wonder, what is the price when you ask for money from a company or from investor at this early stage? What do you give in return?
Okay, so there's a kind of a standard. There is a kind of standard that you give away about 20% of the company at each round, and it doesn't make sense, but it like almost no matter how much money you're raising, each round you give away about 20% of the company. So it starts by you considering. Now, if you only needed 10 grand or 50 grand or something, you could obviously give away less. But most rounds are kind of several hundred thousand or something like that. So the amount you give away is almost standard, and you can change that by just making if you can make your venture really strong, if you can show that you're getting quite a lot of money from early adopter customers, if you're getting a lot of grant money, maybe you find you don't need investment money. But if you need a big chunk of pure investment money, you can expect to give away 20% of the venture. So what you need to do, now I'll answer the second part of your question in a moment. So in general, in general, what you need to do is say, okay, so I have this science-based startup here, and I have I don't have a product yet. I have zero revenue, and you can try and fix that by getting some financial commitment from people who will pay for pilots or early adopters, but you're still pretty much a pre-revenue company. So you need to figure out what is it that you need to do that will get you from looking like a pre-revenue university spin-out science-based company to something that looks much more attractive. Like, is it a bunch of technical development? Is it more customer commitments? And maybe you get 2 or 3 early adopters who are excited by the science, and they will tell you that if you can just demonstrate it at 1 meter squared level, then we're willing to make a bigger commitment to you. And you say, okay, right. So if I can get these major companies to make that bigger commitment to me, then suddenly I can raise, 2 million instead of just, 500,000 or 200,000. So you figure out what is the thing you need to do that's going to make your company obviously more valuable, and you raised enough money to do just that. And you get as much of that from grants as you can, you get as much from customers as you can, and then the rest you get from venture capital people. So how much you need to raise, it should be the minimum that just gets you to that next stage, and normally that's about 18 months or something like that. On the question then of how much do you ask the early adopter customers for? There's a trade-off. If you try to get them to fund that entirely, then they would go back to Brigitte's question and say, well, hold on a second, I'm completely paying for this, then I want to own the intellectual property. But as long as they are providing a minority, 20 or 30% of the total fee, then they cannot have any reasonable claim on the intellectual property. And as long as the amount they're paying is only 20 or 30%, it's not that difficult to ask it for them, because most of them want to see your product. If you're on the right track, they want to see your technology come into being. And the fact that they only need to pay for a minority of that is attractive to them. And there's various terms you can offer them, and in my proposal you'll see that. So I would express that as a kind of percentage of the development. So sort of 20 to 30% of the development cost is what you're asking them for. And then to be credible with investors, you want to try and make sure that that's more than about 10,000 euro. It's 20, 30, whatever thousand euro. So that you can. So it's not just it's not your cousin who works for that big company and did you a favor and got some little small purchase order place. It's actually a corporate decision, which demonstrates that yes, that company really does need this stuff. Does that answer your question?
Mostly yes, but still, if I may ask. So if we talk specifically about the cooperation commitment, so let's imagine I need 500,000 and I ask a big company for some partnership and ask 50 grants. So I propose 1% for this big company and 19% for the investor fund, or how ideal? And I feel also that for a big company, 1% of a zero revenue startup, it's something that is not of interest. So how to make a big company involved in the end in this early stage cooperative commitment?
Okay, I'm not sure I got all of that. Okay, your audio is really bad, Artem.
So my battery is almost dead.
Well, is there a microphone on the laptop or something instead of the microphone on the headphones?
I can try.
Just change your sound inputs.
This?
That is much better. Much better.
Okay, sorry.
So ask me a question again, please.
Yeah, so if we speak specifically about cooperative commitment with a big company, example that you gave with Samsung, and I look, for example, for 500,000, but I want to have some industrial partner for credibility. So I ask, let's say, 500,000 from investor fund and 50K from a big company.
Yeah.
How to make the company interested? To offer 1% of 2019 to investor, 1% to company.
Now hold on, 1% of what?
I don't know. What shall you said that each round will cost about 20% of the.
Yes. Okay. So let me stop you there. early adopter will be giving you cash. It will not be equity money. They will be paying you towards the pilot. You're making a proposal to them that says we're going to do the following technical things. They're just giving you cash. It's not investment. Most companies, almost every corporate that invests in companies does not get involved in seed rounds. It's too complex. It's too messy for them. So the money from the early adopters will not be investment money. It will just be cash. They will be paying. You will have a statement of work that says you're going to do some things, and they're paying you 50 grand towards that. So the investor is giving you money for equity, and the early adopter is just paying you cash.
But how to make the company interested in giving me this 50K, for example?
Look,
I can advertise, I can mention that I am copyright, but it's for me. What can I offer in return?
So go and look at the link I sent you. Okay, there's about a sort of a 1 hour video where I answer that question in a lot of detail. Okay, go and watch that video and look at the proposal. So follow those 2 links, and there's a long answer to the question, but I'm telling you, I've done it a bunch of times. Okay, if you're on the right track, if your science is relevant, if you actually have achieved a significant breakthrough, you can get the money. And if you can't get the money, go home. This is the test. This is a very reliable test of whether you should be doing this venture at all or not. How about that? Look, you are the biggest investor here. We're investing in stuff. We have a portfolio. I could invest in that guy Artem. Yeah, I gave him small investment. Yeah, great. And I don't lose sleep about it after that. You're the one who's potentially committing several years of your life to this. You may take money from your brother who has a good car dealership and lose all the money, maybe, or you're lying awake at night saying, I cannot stand that guy, and now I've lost his money because my venture is going badly. You are the person making the biggest commitment to this. So you should apply this test. Look at my proposal, look at my video, make a bunch of those proposals. And if nobody will give you money, even if some crazy seed fund in France is going to give you a whole lot of money, or whatever country you're in, don't do the venture. If you're on the right track, you will be able to get money like this, or you'll be able to get commitment from some stakeholder groups. And if you can't, then it is strongly suggesting that your venture is not a good venture.
Okay, thanks.
Julian, hold on, Maxime first. Maxime's gone. Okay. So Julian, is an average medium study? Yes, there is pretty much, Julian. And it varies by country. Now, in France, as I said, it's particularly generous. And I would ask Guillaume or Robert, one of the Deeptech Founders guys, to give you a more accurate view. But it's typically kind of $500,000 to $1 million. But Guillaume, what do you think?
For seed stage, I would say it's really between $500,000 to $2 to $3 million in some really particular cases.
Wow.
If we're talking about pharma or quantum computing, but those are a bit out of normal range, but between 0.5 and 2 million.
Yeah,
I would say.
Okay, that's interesting. And like the pharma and the quantum are 2 very interesting and contrasting examples. And let's just talk about those for a moment. So in pharma, pharma deep tech is much more mature than every other sector, because the link between the science in the university and the ultimate money generating product is very well proven. There's any amount of stuff that has been seen to successfully go through that, and the stages, the regulatory pathway is very well defined. In most other sectors of science, it's not. And it's kind of crazy. It's banded country once you leave the university. So there's a lot more money there's a lot more money for life sciences startups, because it's more successfully proven. Now, the other example that PM mentioned is quantum, and quantum is amusing for me, because it's like the vast majority of quantum ones are kind of blue sky science. They're really far from actually generating revenue or whatever. But a bunch of like really deep pocketed organizations have created big funds to put stuff into quantum, and it's kind of like they're completely wild bets. And I don't know that there's enough really good ventures for them to put the money into. So maybe it's a lack of it's a lack of supply of ventures. So the big funds end up they probably end up competing with one another. And so those ventures are, and I know Guillaume told me about one venture recently, that a quantum venture that they sold only 20% of their stock and they got 3 million, which is amazing for a pre-revenue startup. But most of you are not in that situation. So I would say the kind of $500,000 to $1 million for non-life sciences, non-quantum. Now, some of the ones, like if you're crypto as well, crypto is nuts as well. But I expect most of you are possibly none of you are there. Hopefully that answers your question. And Brigitte has another question. Is there an interest in having several funds investing already at the seed stage? Yes and no. Sometimes you can have complementary funds, okay? And so, for example, one common situation that's desirable is, so you have a venture and you've got some, liver-related technology, whatever it is, and you find some liver-focused fund or some fund that is really good, interest in your specialty, and they're in Australia or United States or wherever it is, and they're willing to invest in you, and you're in France, and they're saying, we've never done an investment in France before, don't really know how it works. So in that situation, it's really good for you to get a local investor, and the local investor can say, don't worry about all the legal stuff. We'll get it all set up. You just write a check. That's all you have to do. And they're the kind of local investor for the local kind of legal structures and so on. And then the international investor who's adding the value. That's a great combination. And in general, if you get the specialist investor first, it's really, really easy to get the local investor, because the local investors say, oh my God, this is amazing. I so want to invest in this thing. So like in general, for all of you, I would focus on getting the value added specialist investor first. And then, and they will often say as well, and we will often say, if you're raising $1 million round or $500,000, whatever, we like to make small bets initially. I say, look, we only want to provide this amount of the round, but we're willing to lead. If somebody is willing, and that's an important concept to understand in venture capital. So if you're raising a round of a certain size, if you can get somebody to lead the round, and that's somebody who will be providing at least 20%, ideally sort of 30 or 40% of the round, and that fund is willing to say, we will lead. What that means is that fund is saying to other funds, we have checked out this venture. We've done due diligence on it. Our investment committee has said yes to this, and so you don't need to. You can just follow us, and then that's really easy, because venture capital funds, to understand how it works, So I'm what's called a GP, general partner. So I am day to day looking for ventures and trying to make decisions about what to invest in. I've got money from a bunch of LPs, which is called limited partners, which is people who are just giving me money. They don't have time to go looking for the for the ventures. So they are like pension funds or whatever, and they said, okay, there's some money, go and invest it, right? So my job is to go and invest it. And so I wake up in the morning and say, where am I going to find investments? My God, there's so much work in checking out these investments. And then I get a phone call from another investor say, listen, I've checked out this great one. I've done all the work, right? You just need to write a check. Say, fantastic. Where do I sign? So if you've got a lead investor, especially one that is specialized, like if you've got some crazy liver thing and the crazy liver fund says they'll invest, then the local investor says, great, where do I sign? So there's a couple of scenarios. The local and international specialist is one. Another one is one where VC. Hold on, I'll go back to the question. Several funds investing. There might be complementary things, like for example, go back to my Samsung example, I know those guys. They don't invest at seed stage. But if you had another sort of classic example where it's helpful to have multiple funds is you are doing your first round and you are, you've some cement related technology and Lafarge or somebody wants to invest, and they are in all likelihood going to acquire you later on. Usually when the companies want to invest, it's because they're interested in acquiring you later on. But you don't want Lafarge to be dictating all the terms. So you get a local financial investor to say, okay, we're going to lead. we're actually going to set the terms. And then Lafarge, you can just write a check. So we're not accepting any of your creepy terms about preemption or other things that would give them special rights to the intellectual property or special rights to the technology to acquire you. But they are still making an interest. So you've got a kind of where you've got a corporate investor who wants to get involved. It's really good for you to have them in, as long as you have a financial investor or a lead investor who is keeping them honest, essentially. And so that's another situation. Or finally, last situation, and it's not exactly investment funds, but there may be angel investors who have a lot of value to add. So you might have you might have one VC that says, I'm happy to do the whole round. You're getting some grants from BP or whoever, or some money, some government money, and I will do all the financial, and I really like your venture. And sometimes you might say to them, well, look, this person is giving me great advice, and they were talking to me about investing. I'd like to let them invest 50 grand, and they're going to be the chairman or something like that, or they're going to be some sort of advisor, but they can make a lot of introductions. So it's very often there's one or two value adding people that you just want to let into the round. So I think they're all the scenarios. But otherwise, like if there's otherwise, to go against what I just said, investors you can't get rid of investors. It's easier to get divorced. It's easier to get rid of your spouse than it is to get rid of an investor. And there's risk with each investor that you take on. They could make your life miserable. You can have some really awkward investors, and they get a seat on your board and make your life miserable. So if you can get all the money from one investment fund, then do. And there is no reason, like one of the reasons I've said, to take in an extra one. Like if it's just two investors trying to split the round between themselves and you don't need them both, then only take one.
Okay, I'm thinking, for example, in an interdisciplinary project where you might want to have a fund specialized, let's say, in energy, and another one in clean tech. And is there an interest to do that, or because maybe
yeah, there is. I mean, if you're not really sure what direction you're going to go in, if the multidisciplinary thing, if there's different kind of complementary skill sets, then sure, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So hold on, read one. How long pre-seed, VC, so the exit. So first of all, it's worth understanding how VC funds work.
And just to give a small word about how VC funds work, we will have 5 hours dedicated to investments and how VC works in a couple of weeks. So you might not want to go into too much details.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well. So I'll give a short answer, right? The ones who are investing, in pre-seed, who know what they're doing, are not expecting anything quickly. Okay, it's a sort of 7 to 10 year thing. And the funds that are active in deep tech, who understand deep tech, are either evergreen funds or they're at least 10 year funds. Okay, a lot of traditional VCs are 7 year funds, and then what they do is they raise a fund. They say, okay, this is a 7 year fund. They make all the investments in the first 2 or 3 years, and then they're hoping that in the remaining 4 years that the exits happen, and they can kind of begin to start to pressurize companies. So if you're a science-based venture and you're doing pre-seed, then you want to try and make sure that the people you're dealing with, you're not going at the end of those, at the sort of end of the 2 or 3 years. But it's not really your problem. There's not much they can do. There's not much they can do about it usually. But yeah, ones who are kind of considering a quick exit are really the wrong funds. This is an area for what's called patient capital. Okay. Okay. Font domain is gone. Okay. So that's it. Any more hard questions for me?
Last opportunity, guys.
No, don't worry. I am reachable. And as I say, non-life science guys who are intent on going down the early adopter route, I'd love to talk to you, and a long-term conversation with a view to possibly investing. So. think that's it, Liam.
Yeah, I think that's it, Pearse. Yeah, thank you very much for your patience in answering all those questions. We appreciate it very much. Yeah, it's always why we like to have you in the very first session, and it's really important for us. So thank you very much, Pearse. Thank you very much to all the people who stayed late and all the people who are watching in replay also. And our next session will be next Wednesday at 4:00, and then we will be talking about agility and project management. And we will be talking with Deeptech Founder alumni from the previous session to talk a bit about their experience and how to make the most out of the program. So thank you very much. Thank you all. That was a very nice kickoff, and see you next week.
See you.
Bye-bye.
See you, bye.
Thank you very much.
Questions?
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, Pearse.
Thanks.